We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It's Thursday. Been a busy week. We had some action yesterday that we need to talk about. Of course, we still don't have a Speaker of the House. The Republicans are shitting the bed when it comes to trying to pull together some unity to simply vote for a Speaker of the House. I've said all along, a lot of Democrats have said all along that these people don't do anything. If anything, they are obstructionists, and they are proving it. They are illustrating it every day when they can't even unify enough to elect a leader. They're going to have to go to the Democrats for some help, and the MAGA fucks just aren't feeling that. They're making threats and talking shit. But the fact of the matter is because of what's going on, MAGA is losing a little power here. I think ultimately the MAGA or the Freedom Caucus is going to fade away. They're being exposed for being weak and crazy and stupid. Maybe still a little time yet. It depends on how the Republicans, the so-called reasonably normal Republicans, how long they continue to let them control things. You can see the tide turning here a little bit when we had Jim Jordan fail on the first vote by 20 Republicans voting against him. And then yesterday, it got worse. There were 22 Republicans that voted against them. Now, that's pretty much spitting in the face of MAGA. So I give those 20 or 22 Republicans credit for standing up, getting a pair, and telling them to fuck off. They still need more. I mean, Jim Jordan on the first vote got 200 votes. And yesterday's vote, he got 199. That's a lot of people still thinking Jim is a good guy to have as the Speaker of the House, when he is probably the worst person to have as Speaker of the House. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. That's a big story. You know, with regards to the Hamas-Israeli war, I'm always reluctant to do anything about that because, as I've said, I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't know much about either side's positions. And frankly, I'm not worried about those positions. I am sympathetic to the atrocities and the humanity involved in this thing, but I'm sitting here, an old white guy in the Midwest. I don't have much to add to what's going on in the Middle East. You have to remember this conflict has been going on since well before I was born. I didn't know what it was about when I was young, and I sure as hell don't know what it's about now. A couple of things that have bothered me about this. So I try to talk about how it's impacting the U.S. and not picking sides with this fight. Because no matter what side you pick, you are going to get hammered by the other side. And there's just no money in picking sides in this thing. But while I was scrolling through TikTok, I came across a creator that you all know and that I watch frequently and have had some respect for. And he said something yesterday that just triggered me, just pissed me off. He came out as if he knew something that none of us knew, which is not true. I don't say anything that only I know. Everything I tell you and that I know is stuff you could find if you had the time or the motivation to do it. I'm more an aggregator. I pull that stuff together and tell you in the way I tell you. But anything I tell you, you could find yourself if you took the time to do it. But you got other things to do. You have a life to live. So that's why I do what I do. Anyway, this creator comes out and says, well, Joe Biden did it. He lost all the votes from the millennials and the Gen Zs. Well, what the fuck happened? And basically what this creator is saying, and there have been other people who have said it too, that Joe Biden, by supporting Israel, he lost all the votes from the millennials and the Gen Zs. That's absolute bullshit. There is no information that suggests that. This is somebody coming out of their ass and just saying something. And chances are this came from the Republican sides of things. And that's what I've always told you. When you hear shit like this, consider the source. Try to find the source. I'll bet you 9 times out of 10 it's going to be a Republican. And we know Republicans are pathological liars. So why would you believe that? And then in addition, why would you spread that shit? It just made me mad. And I thought to myself, okay, you're upset that Joe Biden supports Israel, who is an ally of this country. What would you have him do? Would you prefer that he goes to Hamas, terrorist organization, and hug them and support them? That makes no sense. Or would you prefer him to just sit back and watch the world burn down and do nothing about it like Donald Trump would have fucking done? Yeah, I just don't fucking get it. What do you expect out of this guy? He did what he was supposed to do. And if the millennials and the Gen Zs don't want to vote for him after this, well, then all I can say at that point is you deserve what you end up with. But think about that. Joe Biden's lost all the millennials and Gen Z votes. So where are they going to go? Are you telling me they're going to say, I don't want to vote for Joe Biden, so instead I'm going to vote for Donald Trump or whoever the nominee is for the Republican Party? The party that is full of grifters, liars, pathological liars, the party that tried to overthrow this country, overturn elections, the party that overturned Roe v. Wade, the party that wants everybody to have free guns. Are you trying to tell me that millennials and Gen Zs are so stupid that they won't vote for Joe Biden for doing his job, and then they will in turn to the Republicans? It's absolutely fucking ridiculous. That's not going to happen. And it annoys me when people push out this information based on nothing, knowing nothing. Again, I've always said we have to look at logic and common sense. And it irritates me when people spew this stuff because they saw it printed someplace and they thought it was cool and enticing and salacious and sensational, and they just spew it out without checking it. I'll guarantee you this person didn't check it out because he should know better than that. There is no way that Joe Biden's losing the millennials or Gen Zs simply because he supports Israel. He really had no choice. They are our allies. And then people will come out and say, well, the Israelis did this, the Israelis did that. Let me tell you something. Go down the list of our allies. There's probably a lot of shit that those allies do that we would not support, but we support the country. All these other countries have different ways of life and they have different levels of morality. And they have different ideas about violence and fighting and war. My problem is I don't worry about what's going on in the Middle East because, as I said, I don't know anything about what that situation is. I know it's been going on a long time, but I don't know much about it. And I don't waste time trying to figure it out or form an opinion because we've got enough shit in this country to worry about. Things that are just as tragic, things where people are dying, things that need to be changed and we need to address. And I think we need to clean up our own backyard before we worry about other countries. I'm not talking about being an isolationist, but we can't put what we've got going on here on hold to turn at every shiny object. I'm not trying to diminish the war. It's a horrible thing. There's a lot of atrocities, but you understand what I'm saying. I say that we have things that are just as tragic. This is just as abhorrent going on in this country, and we need to deal with them. What are those things? Glad you asked. How about the 1 million Americans that died in the pandemic because Donald Trump and the Republicans were negligent? Now, I got an opinion on that one. Or how about all these Trump-la-fucks that attacked the Capitol, injured 150 police officers, killed a few people, and attempted to overturn an election, overthrow a democracy, and overthrow the government in total? Now, I got an opinion about that. Or how about taking the constitutional rights away from women, taking away their bodily autonomy, putting them in risky situations for their own health because of some religious concept that is outdated. I'm worried about that, and I have an opinion about that. So you see, we've got problems here that we need to address before we can worry about trying to fix problems in another country. I'm not saying we don't do anything. Joe Biden's doing what he's supposed to do with any ally, support them in any way they can. And when Congress comes back in office and starts working again, they're going to have to look at some money to help them or weapons to help them. It's just the way the game is played. And for somebody to suggest that because of this one situation where Joe Biden went to Israel to support Netanyahu and the Israelis, that's going to cost him the election. That's fucking stupid. That's ridiculous. That is not true. And I'm tired of people coming up with all these bits of drama just to make it more interesting. They're doing it because they want more views, you know? They want more followers. And I'm sorry, that doesn't work. You're not doing any good for the people of this country or the country itself. In fact, you're doing a disservice. You're doing the same disservice that we're seeing out of the media, telling you enough to make you nervous or scared so you keep watching. It just pissed me off to no end. It's ridiculous. We should not be doing that. And I expected better out of this creator. And it's not just him. There are other creators doing it too. Here's one thing I noticed about creators, and I'm very careful about this whenever I do a TikTok. But once you get on a roll of doing TikToks and you see a story, you go, cool, I'm going to check that out. That's an interesting story, which is what I do. And I presume the other creators do something similar to that. But when you're on a roll and you see this tasty bit of scandal going on or sensational or salacious news, sometimes you get lazy. You just grab it from wherever you got it from and spew it forth because you know people will be jacked up about it. But you didn't check where it came from or if it's a story anywhere else. And oftentimes you get burned that way. I think I've been burned like that once and it was my own fault. But ever since that point, I'm very careful to check and see. And even if it sounds like a great story that I know will get a lot of attention, if I can't verify it, I'm not talking about it. My credibility is more important than the number of views I get. One other thing I wanted to talk about when I'm talking about this war thing with Israel and Hamas, you're going to get some negative comments. And when I talked about focusing on this country as opposed to trying to figure out something nobody's been able to figure out for decades, some people will come to me and they will support what I'm saying. Other people will have a different attitude about it. They'll come to me and say, oh, you don't know anything about Hamas. You don't know anything about Israel. And you're right, I don't know anything about it at all. And that's why I don't talk about it. I had one other commenter on one of my TikToks, and this guy was ultra angry because he did it on TikTok, he did it on Facebook, and he did it on YouTube. Now, when he came to TikTok, I checked out his account. 0 followers, 0 videos, and he's following 0 people. And he has boomer reference in his name. So this guy created this account strictly to come after me, to call me out, to expose me. So what he did was this. He came on to the page and he made this comment. This creator will block anybody who disagrees with him. Now, that's not totally true. I don't mind people disagreeing with me. I think it makes it more entertaining, quite frankly. But the moment I see somebody who's clearly a Trumplefok, who's spewing conspiracy theories, calling people names, I immediately block them. I block them without a second thought. So these people who get butthurt about this come in, they get another account, then I block those fuckers too. Here's the thing. I have blocked literally thousands in the last 3 years of Trumplefucks. If I didn't block them, I'd probably have a lot more followers, but I don't give a fuck about that. I don't care about huge numbers of followers. What I look for is a good amount of followers that are all quality followers, or peers, as I call them. If you ever look at the comments on my TikToks, I very rarely get a negative comment because I've gotten rid of all those people. And the reason I do it is twofold. First of all, I feel compelled to argue with them, and I should know better because you can't argue with them. They can't comprehend truth, facts, or anything. They can't comprehend it. So the argument is pointless. And then they get butthurt, and then they go yell to TikTok, "Oh, he's mean to me. You should take that video down." Because I value the platform, both TikTok and here on the podcast, as well as Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff, because I value it, I would much rather get rid of these people, exile these people, and focus on the quality followers and peers I have on the podcast and on TikTok. I don't need 1 million followers. I just need the vast majority to be good followers or peers or listeners. And that's what I have on TikTok, on the podcast, on all the other platforms. I don't have the most followers as compared to some of these other creators. But I will tell you this, I have the best quality. I have the people of a like mind. And the reason that's important is because the more people of a like mind that come together, the more power we have, the louder our voice is. And that is far more important to me than dealing with Trumplefucks. So yes, I do block them. But if you're listening to the podcast, hopefully you know this. It doesn't matter if you disagree with me. There's a good chance at some point you will disagree with me. And as long as you're reasonable and intelligent about it, I'm going to listen. I might even change my mind because maybe you know something more than I do. But when you start spewing bullshit, you're fucking gone. You're just fucking gone. I'm not even going to entertain that. So the guy who said he blocks all the people that disagree with him, I blocked his fake account too, so fuck him. All right, we have an email. One email says, "Hi, Mike. Remember the law that was passed by Georgia legislator and signed by Brian Kemp that set up the commission to oversee prosecuting attorneys? Well, the Georgia Republicans have wasted no time. They have filed a complaint against District Attorney Fani Willis. They want her investigated over the charges she brought against Trump and 18 cohorts. If allowed to do this, they'll be able to go through every document. They'll be dissecting everything and knowing how corrupt the Republicans are. They'll be making everything a big deal. I mean, if there's even a typo, they'll be screaming about it not being legit. I can't stand these corrupt politicians. How far are they willing to go for this orange piece of crap that has done so much to damage this country? I'm sure they're also doing this to exert power over their state and Fani Willis in particular. I don't know what's going to happen with this, but I hope they can be stopped. When will enough be enough for these Republicans? Will they ever do the right thing by this country? Thanks, V." Well, V, I wouldn't worry too much about it. I really wouldn't. Because as much as Brian Kemp signed this bill, he can also stop it. And he's said as much that he will. He has been pressured by the legislature to do something with Fani Willis. And he said, as far as I'm concerned, she's doing a good job. So in as far as stopping it, that they might try, but I think Brian Kemp will stop it ultimately, and it won't go anywhere. It's just, it's like Don Quixote tilting at windmills. They've tried everything they can possibly try. Tell me once in the last 2.5 years, these efforts to undermine the Democrats, tell me once where it's worked. It's never worked. They fail constantly, from Jim Jordan all the way up to Donald Trump. They're constant failures. Donald Trump is going to appeal this gag order, and that's going to fail. I wouldn't worry about this too much, because even if they fire Fani Willis, whoever takes over will have worked for Fani Willis, and they'll continue with the case. Getting rid of Fani Willis doesn't stop the case. It just gets Fani Willis out of the way. But there are prosecutors on this case that work for Fani Willis who will likely step in should she be replaced. That said, don't worry about that bullshit. It's not going to happen. I don't think that Brian Kemp will allow that at all. One other thing I wanted to talk about, just in passing before we get to the first story. I just heard that NBC has filed a motion, an appeal, to have Donald Trump's federal trial regarding January 6th televised. Now, we know federal courts don't typically televise their trials, but that doesn't mean it can never happen. When a media outlet like NBC files a motion, and no doubt some other media outlets will file a motion, they have to look at it. They have to run it through the system. And it's conceivable, given the circumstance and the importance to this country, that they might very well allow TV cameras into the January 6th trial with Judge Chutkan and Jack Smith. Now, we don't know for sure if that's going to happen, but it could. And NBC is testing the waters and trying to appeal it to a higher court and see if it will be allowed. Keep your fingers crossed on that one. Hopefully it will be televised. I think that will go a long way in healing this country. People will no longer just be listening to their chosen media site and getting only what they're willing to tell them. If they can sit and watch the trial, they'll see the facts, and the story will be the same for everybody who watches it. And that could bring things together in this country and also cause some Trumplafucks who just don't know any better to maybe slow it down a little bit. Now, keep in mind, the case in Georgia, that is going to be on television. The first case is going to be Sidney Powell and Kenneth Chesebro. We'll talk more about him later. But that's starting next Monday. That's coming up quick, very quick. And that's going to be on television. And even though it's just Sidney Powell and it's just Kenneth Chesebro, there's going to be a lot of evidence revealed in that case. Fani Willis has said that she's going to reveal all the information because it's a RICO case. And then when she does the other trials with Donald Trump and whoever else, she'll just do it again. So in this first trial, we're going to be able to see a lot. And Donald Trump is going to be spinning around in his shitty diaper. I promise you that. Now, of course, I was talking about earlier in the podcast that there was the second vote for Speaker of the House in the House of Representatives yesterday. Jim Jordan, of course, was the Republican nominee, the heir apparent. He lost the first one by 20 votes. Well, put it this way. He lost it by 17 votes, and 20 Republicans voted against him. The first vote, he got 200 votes, but needed 217 votes. He didn't get it, and 20 Republicans voted against him. Now, the next vote came yesterday, and it was funny because Jim Jordan and all his little cronies were saying things like, yeah, we don't know if we're going to win. It might even be worse than the first time, which I found funny. If you already know this, why are you holding the vote? I mean, we all know that Nancy Pelosi would never put up a vote unless she knew for sure she was going to win. I mean, what does Jim Jordan have some kind of kink where he enjoys getting embarrassed on national television? I don't know. I don't know what it is, but they had the vote. 22 Republicans voted against him, and he got 199 votes. You want to hear the interesting part of this story, though. In this second vote, Hakeem Jeffries got 212 votes. Every one of the Democrats voted for Hakeem Jeffries, as it should be. The day before, when Jim Jordan only got 200 votes, Hakeem Jeffries again had 212 votes. In the 15 ballots that were taken to get Kevin McCarthy in office, Hakeem Jeffries got 212 votes every time. So in terms of the vote, in the last 17 votes or ballots for Speaker of the House, Hakeem Jeffries has won each and every time. He got the most votes in every contest, beating the Republican nominee. Now, of course, at 212 votes, that's still not enough to be Speaker of the House. But the fact that the Democrats are showing this much unity and the Republicans are shooting themselves in the foot by being ununified or not coming together or divided is really making the Democrats more powerful, even though they have fewer representatives. They're in the minority, but they control more shit because the Republicans can just not come together. Now, in spite of the fact that 20 or 22 Republicans voted against Jim Jordan, it's not like they didn't try their typical little strategies, coercion, threats, and that sort of thing. Apparently, there was outside pressure, a campaign by conservative media and supporters of Representative Jim Jordan's speaker bid. We had Sean Hannity coercing people that watch their show, coercing politicians to vote for Jim Jordan. I mean, what's this world come to when a news media outlet, and I put that in quotations because they're not really a news media outlet. When has that ever happened when this media company or any media company gets involved in the campaigning part of this and essentially throws out threats? Some of the Republicans called some of the other Republicans that would be or didn't vote for Jim Jordan, and they kind of threatened him with being primaried or never being in office again. That is a sure sign of desperation. But the amazing thing is, while that kind of strategy has worked in the past, it hasn't worked this time. Those 20 or 22 Republicans said, "We don't care, fuck yourself," and you got to give them some props for doing that. I mean, it's taken them 7 years to get to this point, but at least they did it when it counts. So Jordan has now failed twice to get the votes needed to become speaker. He's absolutely got no clear path forward, and the outside pressure of his opponents helps explain why. He thought that by pressuring these people, they would fold up. I mean, that's how bullies behave. Where bullies fail is when people that are being bullied say, "fuck yourself," and don't fall in line. And that's what happened. Representative Don Bacon spoke out Tuesday night after his wife received anonymous and vaguely threatening text messages saying the congressman had better vote for Jordan. They're messing with the wrong guy. "I'm not going to be cowed by this stuff," Bacon told Huffington Post on Wednesday. "I spent 30 years in the Air Force, 4 deployments. You think a bunch of threats and weird Twitter comments get under my skin?" Several more Republicans came forward Wednesday to complain about what they considered intimidation tactics by Jordan allies. Though none accused their colleague himself of orchestrating the campaign, the offices of members opposing Jordan were swamped with angry phone calls. And representatives from Sean Hannity's Fox News show even bugged lawmakers with emails urging them to back Jordan's speakership. Representative Jen Kiggins of Virginia vowed Wednesday that the threats and intimidation tactics will not change my principles and value. Another Jordan no vote, Representative Kay Granger of Texas, similarly called out the threats. This was a vote of conscience, and I stayed true to my principles, Granger said on social media. Intimidation and threats will not change my position. Kiggins and Bacon voted for ousted former Speaker Kevin McCarthy in the second roll call vote on Wednesday, which saw Jordan lose 22 Republicans. He can only lose 4 members of his conference and still get the gavel. Fewer Republicans, 20, had voted against Jordan a day earlier. The backward momentum suggests Jordan's speaker bid is doomed. Now, Representative Byron Donald said, I don't think it's been helpful to Jim. Now, he's a Jordan ally, but Americans are really passionate. They want their voices to be heard. Their voices should be heard. But, some of the stuff just is not going to move these members. Donald said that while members of the public contacting lawmakers may be patriots, their messages aren't helping the cause. I think everybody just needs to stop. Yeah, you think? Just let the members have the discussions amongst us. Republicans have been leaderless since a small right-wing faction forced McCarthy out. Like I said, a group of 8 people have pretty much dictated what the Republicans are doing. And the bottom line is the Republicans are doing nothing. They're typically obstructionists, but they're so divided they can't come together and elect a Speaker of the House. All of this is going to show up in the campaign in 2024, the do-nothing House of Representatives. It's not going to go well for them, and those Republicans of a reasonable mind know that, and they are frantic now to try to get this put together and get something going. So the common thought now is that maybe the only thing they can do is put out a bill, which they are doing today, to give the Speaker pro tempore, McHenry, more power so that at least he can go through the processes, the machinations of actually doing what the House of Representatives does. As it stands now, nothing can be done because nobody has the power of the gavel and is Speaker of the House. McHenry is a temporary Speaker, but he has no power. So nothing can get done. And this is where the Republicans are starting to freak out. They need to get some things done so they've got something to talk about in the 2024 election. Right now, all they've got is a bunch of embarrassment. And the intelligent minds in the Republican Party know this, and they're starting to freak out. Now, Jim Jordan is talking about having a third vote today. It's not been set at the time I'm recording this, but it wouldn't surprise me. And what wouldn't surprise me as well is that he will have even more Republicans defecting from him. 20 the first time, 22 yesterday. I wouldn't be surprised if you get 24 or 25 that say, fuck you, Jim Jordan. You're shoving this down our throats. You're doing nothing but wasting time that we should be working. And as long as you're having these votes, we can't work. We need to come up with some resolution to put ourselves in a position to actually do the work of the people. All right, we will take a quick break and we'll be right back. Well, with all the stuff going on, it's sometimes hard to remember everything else that is happening. And I'll remind you that Letitia James' lawsuit against Donald Trump, Eric Trump, Don Jr., Weisselberg, and Kami, I think his name is, that's still going on. And I'll be honest with you, it's not going well for those folks. Donald Trump is in some deep trouble. There's a lot of witnesses being called, and they all have some bad shit to say about Donald Trump's fraudulent behavior when he was running his company. Now, Michael Cohen was set up to testify this week, but apparently he has some health issues. and will probably show up next week. But as I told you before, Donald Trump decided to show up to court this week, and he was there yesterday. And frankly, he's like an incorrigible child. He's like a spoiled brat. He sits there in court. He's listening to these witnesses give away all Donald Trump's secrets, illustrating all of his fraudulent behavior. And Donald Trump has trouble just sitting there being quiet. He's flailing around with his arms. He's grunting. He's harumphing. He's talking to his lawyers a little too loud. He's not handling it well. He's just not handling it well. In fact, he got so out of hand. Judge Engoron warned Donald Trump and others to keep their voices down following an outburst at the New York civil fraud trial Wednesday. Now, Supreme Court Justice Arthur Engoron admonished the former president after he threw up his hands in frustration and spoke aloud to his lawyers at the defense table as real estate appraiser Doug Larson testified. And prosecutor Kevin Wallace asked Trump's team to stop commenting on witness testimony. Now, what Donald Trump is doing, he's sitting there and he's moving around and he's glaring at the witnesses. Apparently, since now he can't do it on Truth Social, he decides to show up and try to intimidate the witnesses. Well, the witnesses are already on the stand. It's a little too late to intimidate them. And frankly, Donnie, you're getting weaker every day and you can't intimidate fucking anybody. The judge then asked everyone in the courtroom to keep their voices down, particularly if it's meant to influence the testimony. And you know that's exactly what Donald Trump was trying to do. He wasn't doing it very well, and he wasn't going to be allowed to continue. But Judge Engoron basically said, shut your fucking orange trap. Now, Trump lawyer Lazaro Fields tried to establish that Larson had underestimated the projected 2015 value of the Trump-owned office building by $114 million. But Larson testified the value was not wrong, but based on information he had at the time, which caused the former president to throw up his hands in exasperation. See what I mean? He doesn't want to hear this shit, even though it's true. He can't distract from it. He can't delay it. It's there in front of him, and it's driving him fucking nuts. Now, Fields also accused Larson of lying and pointed to a decade-old email exchange between the appraiser and former Trump Organization controller Jeffrey McConney, who had cited him as an outside expert on the valuation of Trump properties. Larson had testified that he never consulted with or gave permission for McConney to cite him for that purpose. So McConney just made that shit up. Now, Trump's attorney, John Lauro, hit a snag in his effort to appeal a gag order. You remember the gag order that was put out by Judge Chutkan. Well, John Lauro, his lawyer, who we've seen on TV, making some horrible mistakes, decides they're going to appeal this gag order. A federal court has notified them that he needs to be admitted to the court in order to do it. Seems John Lauro wasn't involved in the bar where he needs to be to even make this appeal. Well, that's a little troubling. Now, in a letter to Lauro on Wednesday, the clerk of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit said Lauro must first join the court's bar before any of his filings are accepted, reported Darren Samuelson and Steve Riley. You know, you would have thought they'd check that out ahead of time. Better to be prepared than sorry, but apparently John Lauro wasn't aware of the rule. It goes on to say, our records reveal that you are not a member of the bar of this court, said the letter, adding, it is the policy of the court that all attorneys appearing before it be members of the bar of this court. Our rules do not allow us to accept filings from attorneys who are not members. Lauro told the messenger that this is a routine matter and that he plans to join the court's bar. But again, why would you do that after the trial started? This is a routine matter. Then why didn't you do it in preparation for this trial? You dumb fuck. He said, I've been a member of the D.C. bar and a federal trial court bar for nearly 40 years, Lauro told reporters. This is a routine request from federal appellate court to join its bar, which I will do in order to represent President Trump in this matter. Again, why not just do it before you go into court? Don't you know what the law is, what the rules are? This comes after Federal District Judge Tanya Chutkin approved the order earlier this week at the request of the federal prosecutors with the gag order. The order prohibits Trump from disparaging special counsel Jack Smith and his family, witnesses, and court officers in the case, but does not prohibit him from publicly discussing or disputing the case in general. Now, the hearing in which Chutkin made the decision went disastrously for the former president and Lauro, with Chutkin at one point laughing in Lauro's face after he said the gag order was unnecessary because the current restrictions on his client were working, which we know they aren't. Legal experts have suggested that Trump's appeal of the gag order is unlikely to succeed, and I think that goes without fucking saying. It's not going to succeed. I mean, how many appeals has Donald Trump filed over the last 2.5, 3 years? How many has he won? Maybe one that didn't matter, but all the rest, he failed. He lost because Donald Trump is a losing loser who's always losing. Now, talking about the Israeli-Hamas war, President Biden flew to Israel to meet with Benjamin Netanyahu and show his support for Israel. He spoke a little bit with the press over there, and he did the job he was supposed to do. Some people like it, some people don't. But the bottom line is he really had no choice in the matter. He had to support Israel. They are our allies. Hamas attacked them. Some people are upset that he's supporting Israel, but he's just doing his fucking job. Like I say, what are the alternatives? Support Hamas, a terrorist organization, or do nothing like Donald Trump? Those aren't good options. The problem Joe Biden has by going over to Israel, if he goes, he's going to get admonished for supporting Israel, and people are going to talk about all the atrocities they call them, or whatever. They're going to say he supports it. But if he decides not to go, like some people on my account have suggested, then they're going to say, well, he's a coward. He wouldn't even go there. This was a no-win situation for Joe Biden. And Joe Biden has been in this situation before where it was a no-win situation, like when he pulled the troops out of Afghanistan. He knew he was going to get heat when he did that, but he chose to do it anyway because that was the right thing to do. And I think that's what we want from our politicians. Make choices that are right as opposed to choices that are expedient that will benefit the politician. Joe did something that some people don't like, but that's his fucking job, and that's what he had to do. He's thinking about doing the right thing as opposed to trying to garner votes. Now, Joe Biden is going to address the nation tonight, to update Americans on the U.S. response to the Hamas attacks. The 8 p.m. Eastern Time Oval Office speech comes a day after Biden's high-stakes visit to Israel, where he pressed Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to allow aid from Egypt into Gaza for Palestinian civilians reeling from Israeli strikes. Now, see, that's the thing. They blame Joe Biden for going over there and supporting whatever Israel is doing. They don't really understand why Joe went over there. Joe went to try to calm things down and get people some help, getting supplies to the Palestinian people who have their electricity and their water and everything cut off. These people will die of starvation and of dehydration faster than if they get hit with bullets or bombed. Joe Biden went over to make sure that those folks get the kind of care and resources they deserve, and he did that. He also went over there to try to calm Israel down. They're talking about taking 300,000 troops and invading Gaza, which could cause a mess because as soon as they do that, Iran's going to get all wired up, and then we've got a bigger war. You can say that Joe Biden went over there and he supports the things that Israel is doing, but in fact, he was trying to be a mediator and get some things done that needed to be done that nobody else would do. Now, in a rare move, Biden spoke to reporters aboard Air Force One, telling them he'd been on the plane with Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi in a blunt negotiation, and that el-Sisi had agreed to open the closed Rafah crossing gate in southern Gaza to allow up to 20 trucks with aid to get through. Joe said, I came to get something done, and I got it done. They're going to patch the road. They have to fill in the potholes for the trucks to get through, he said. Expect that taking about 8 hours tomorrow. So there may be nothing rolling through probably until Friday. Asked about what he told Israeli officials, Biden said, I was very blunt about the need to support getting humanitarian aid to Gaza. Get it to Gaza and do it quickly. He added, I got no pushback, virtually none. Let me say it again. I got no pushback. He said, look, Israel has been badly victimized, but the truth is that if they have an opportunity to relieve suffering of people who have nowhere to go, they're going to be, it's what they should do, Biden said. And if they don't, they'll be held accountable in ways that may be unfair. So you see what Joe's saying there. He's trying to appeal to these people to do the right thing when they're mad as hell and they just want to wipe everybody off the planet. You can say Joe went over there and supports genocide or whatever you want to fucking call it, but Joe was really trying to calm things down a little bit and hopefully help some people that were in dire need and maybe slow down this impending invasion into Gaza, which would be messy and very deadly. Now, before he left for Israel, questions were raised about whether making the trip was worth the physical and political risk, something Biden brought up himself Wednesday. He said, let me choose my words here. Not many people thought that we would get this done, he said, apparently referring to the delivery of aid to Gaza. And not many people want to be associated with failure. Not many people want to be associated with failure, and there was, quite frankly, a lengthy hour or more discussion about whether to go because we had gone and this failed, then, the United States failed. Biden's presidency failed, etc., which would be legitimate criticism. Saying Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas and Jordan's King Abdullah were in a tough spot, Biden continued. We were putting all of them in a tough situation if we didn't get this done. And so it had to be, in my view, we either took all the blame or not put anyone else on the spot or get it done. And I thought it was worth taking the chance to get it done. So as I say, what's going on here is Joe Biden could have taken the easy way out, sat back like Donald Trump would have done, and saved him some political blowback or risking failing. Joe Biden instead chose to do the right thing, to help people, and that's what he did. And for those people that are saying Joe Biden's losing votes or I'm mad at Joe Biden for supporting Israel, you apparently don't understand what really went on and what he was intending to do. He does want to support Israel, but he's trying to help people that are in need and stop the killing. That's who Joe Biden is in this situation. He's not going over there and and trying to help them whip up this war. Because if this war gets whipped up, it could become much bigger, include Iran and Russia and America. Nobody wants that shit. Joe Biden especially does not want that shit. Now, I saw this interesting videotape, and it just made me laugh how stupid some people are and how far they will go to try to own the libtards. Representative Austin Scott of Georgia tried to blame the current House Speaker debacle on Democrats, even though Florida Republican Representative Matt Gaetz masterminded the effort to remove Kevin McCarthy from the job. Now, in the process, he engaged in what anchor Breonna Keeler called verbal gymnastics in an attempt to do what members of his party have done recently: blamed the opposite party for a situation started and exacerbated by his Republican colleagues. Democrats knew what they were doing when they put up 208 votes to take him out of the speakership, and that's what created the current situation, said Scott, who briefly made a run at Speaker himself. So what he's saying here is that if the Democrats just voted for Kevin McCarthy, we wouldn't have had this problem. Well, the Republicans have the majority. They should be the one voting for the Speaker of the House when said Speaker of the House is a Republican. I mean, let's be honest. Let's look at some of the other votes we've had. The infrastructure bill, the COVID relief bill. Those went right along party lines. Democrats voted for them. Republicans voted against them. And then when they were enacted, then the Republicans tried to take credit for them. So now that they couldn't come together, they had no unity in their party. They're trying to blame the Democrats for not voting for Kevin McCarthy. Really? That's what you expected them to do? Now, Keeler noted they didn't take him out of the speakership. The Republicans are the majority. And he went on to say, just factually speaking, there were only 8 Republicans and there were 208 Democrats, Scott said, while ignoring the vote to remove McCarthy came at the behest of those 8 Republicans. Keeler pressed him, but sir, who's in the majority? And then he went on to say, well, the Democrats were in the majority of the vote, meaning they had most of the votes taking out Kevin McCarthy. Well, of course they did. They're Democrats, and Kevin McCarthy is the weakest, dumbest speaker we've had to date. He said, ignoring her point that the Republicans currently have a slim majority of the House. No, Keeler said. Who's in the majority of the House of Representatives? He admitted Republicans are in the majority of the House, but Democrats provided the majority of the votes to take Kevin McCarthy out of the speakership. See what he's trying to do here? It's absolutely ridiculous. Republicans fucked up. Republicans don't have any unity. They can't even use their minimal majority to get anything done, including get a Speaker of the House elected. And when they can't do it, and when they are looking like fools, they have the audacity to try to blame the Democrats. Well, nobody, not even the stupidest human, would grasp that. It's fucking ridiculous. Now, Keeler pointed out that Republicans provided the key votes and added, they're in the majority. They can provide enough votes, obviously, to put a Republican speaker in place, which is true. Scott doubled down, noting that Democrats provided 96% of the votes to remove McCarthy. So the fuck what? The Democrats should want to remove McCarthy because he's a fool. He's a liar. At which point Keeler referred to what he was saying as some interesting verbal gymnastic. He wasn't too happy about being called out. What do you mean? I'm just calling out the facts, Scott said, before once again noting the large number of Democratic votes to remove McCarthy. Keeler said, I'm talking about how it works, before offering a civics lesson, and that is the majority of the House of Representatives. Your party is responsible for electing the Speaker, not the Democrats. My question is, why do these people agree to go on these shows when they don't know what they're talking about. They're almost assuredly going to get embarrassed like this fucking clown did. He's not the only one trying to blame the Democrats, but it's absolutely ridiculous. Why would the Democrats vote for Kevin McCarthy? Why would they vote for Jim Jordan? And why wouldn't they vote for Hakeem Jeffries? Now, if the Democrats just sat back and didn't vote it, maybe he'd have some complaint. But they voted for the man that they felt was best for the Speaker of the House. They did their job. They didn't get enough votes for their Speaker, but they had no obligation to vote for Kevin McCarthy or Jim Jordan. This is just a lame, weak attempt to try to divert the blame that they should be getting for being absolutely fucking incompetent. Now, here's an interesting story. We've talked about this Georgia case. I think we're looking at May or so for, or is it March? I think May is Florida. I think it's March for Georgia, or maybe they haven't set the exact date. But the first trial in Georgia will take place in just a few days. It's the 19th, and I think it starts the 23rd, would put us at Monday. And it's going to be Kenneth Chesebro and Sidney Powell. Now, we've been waiting to see if people will plead out and flip on Donald Trump. But here's an interesting thing. Former President Donald Trump's campaign attorney, Kenneth Chesebro, is set to go to trial this month in a few days to defend against running interference in the 2020 presidential election. He rejected a plea deal offered in late September from Georgia prosecutors, according to ABC News. That was fucking dumb. Attorney Kenneth Chesebro, one of the 18 co-defendants charged alongside Donald Trump in Fulton County, declined the offer that would have allowed him to dodge prison. He would not go to prison. He would be put on parole. He said no. Not a very smart lawyer. In return, Chesebro would plead guilty to the top racketeering felony charge, sources told the network, noting that he would have to agree to write a letter of apologies. Doing what Republicans do, double down, triple down. Right now, he's facing 7 counts accusing him of pushing a strategy to use so-called alternate electors to stymie the Democratic nominee, Joe Biden, from reaching 270 electoral votes. This is a serious charge. He's going to get convicted, and he's going to do jail time. Fulton County prosecutor Nathan Wade confirmed in court that a plea deal would be extended to both Chesebro and Powell ahead of the trial. We'll sit down and kind of put some things together, and we'll reach out to the defense counsel individually to extend an offer, said the prosecutor. We haven't heard if Sidney Powell has turned it down as yet. Now, Chesebro is said to have helped invent the fake elector scheme, writing a memo to a Trump campaign lawyer that games out how electors for Trump could subvert the electoral vote. Well, legally, they couldn't. And Kenneth Chesebro basically sentenced himself to jail in that situation. Now, last month, his attorneys tried and failed to toss the RICO case. They said, yeah, let's just dismiss it. And the judge said, yeah, let's not. The judge described the defense's argument as strained reading of Georgia law. Terms of the deal offered the Esquire a chance to take advantage of Georgia's First Offender Act, which permits first-time offenders of mostly nonviolent crimes to be granted softer punishment. But again, he said no. Had Chesebro accepted the prosecutor's deal, he could have completed probation and his record would have been wiped clean. I'd be all over that deal when I know I broke the law, but not this super intelligent lawyer, Kenneth Chesebro. Neither Chesebro's attorney nor a Fulton County District Attorney's Office spokesman commented. Trials for Chesebro, along with co-defendant Sidney Powell, are scheduled to get underway this week with 450 potential jurors set to be considered when selections begin on Friday. Wow. I got to tell you, if I'm Kenneth Cheesebro and I'm in a RICO case with Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, and others, and they said, listen, just sign this paper, testify, and you'll get a little probation, and eventually we'll take this off your record. I would have been all over that shit. For some reason, he thinks he's got a chance to win, and the fact is, he does not have a chance in hell. Wow. It's going to be interesting when that case starts. As I've said, it's going to be on television. We already know that for a fact. We also know that Fani Willis is going to expose a lot of evidence, whether it ties into these two or not. It's a RICO case, so she's got to tell the whole story. And it's going to open up some eyes for the other defendants. Once that case starts and they see what happens, you're going to see a lot of flipping motherfuckers at that point. Now, I don't usually talk about Newsmax because it's a joke of a news source. But during a recent spot on Newsmax, Mike Huckabee discussed the possibility of Hakeem Jeffries becoming Speaker of the House despite the Republican majority. Mike Huckabee is suggesting this. Now, I've said all along that's not going to happen. I don't see the Republicans voting for Hakeem Jeffries. But because Jim Jordan's already fallen short twice in the votes, many are left wondering if Republicans in the House could secure the necessary votes for anybody. Now, in each of these votes for Kevin McCarthy, Steve Scalise, and Jim Jordan, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries has received all 212 votes, as I was talking about before. They've got a unified Democratic caucus. Now, if 5 Republicans were to become fed up and vote for him, he'd be Speaker of the House. I just don't see that happening. Mike Huckabee said of this possibility, there's a real risk. I don't think it's a huge one, but there is a risk that the Republicans could continue to splinter, and the Democrats would end up getting 2 or 3 Republican votes and electing Hakeem Jeffries to be the Speaker. Well, we know Republicans tend to be paranoid, so yeah, you go with that. Worry about that risk. What Mike Huckabee is trying to do is trying to coerce people to vote for Jim Jordan or whoever the Republican nominee is. He's basically saying, if you don't quit fucking around and vote for this guy, you could have Hakeem Jeffries as the Speaker of the House. As I say, I don't see that fucking happening. That's not going to happen. But Huckabee went on to say, can you think of anything that could be more disastrous and embarrassing than Republicans unable to govern? I could think of other things that are more embarrassing, like trying to overthrow the government, undermine democracy, overturn elections. That might be more embarrassing. But you're right, the fact that they can't govern. What if we thought that? Well, the fact is, I think everybody already thinks that. You've proven that since you've taken over the majority. He says, handing the gavel over to Hakeem Jeffries? It's in the realm of possibility. I don't think it will happen. Surely not. It's just how ridiculous this has become. And as I say, when he's talking about this, the reason he's saying it is he's trying to scare Republicans into just reacting and voting for Jim Jordan or whoever the fuck it is. It's a little psychological game he's playing, and it's not going to work. I mean, it took Kevin McCarthy 15 tries, and that was largely due to the 8 fucking MAGA fucks that was the fly in the ointment. In this case, with Jim Jordan, it's a different situation. There's just a bunch of people that don't like him. They're just not into you, Jim Jordan, and they're never going to vote for you. And he can only lose 4 votes, and he's at 22 now. Do you really think that's going to change when they take the vote later today, if they do? And if they don't, they better start thinking quickly on what they need to do. I don't think Hakeem Jeffries will ever get 5 votes from the Republican Party, but something's going to have to happen. And as I said earlier, the talk really is that they want to give more power to the temporary Speaker of the House, McHenry, so they can actually get some things done. But if that happens, that is going to be an incredible embarrassment to the Republican Party, too. Republicans are in a bad situation right now. They already look foolish. They already look inept. They look incompetent, and they look like they can't govern. That's not something we can look forward down the road. This is how people are looking at it right now. Even if they fix it tomorrow, they still spent the last 2.5 weeks with no Speaker of the House because they have no unity in the Republican Party. All right, we are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen. I hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.